I was sitting in the most important board meeting of my career when my phone buzzed with a group text that would change everything. The message from my younger brother Marcus read, "Don't come to the weekend barbecue. My new wife says you'll make the whole party stink." I watched in disbelief as my parents immediately spammed likes on the message, publicly endorsing my humiliation. My hands trembled as I typed back a simple "understood," while my colleagues stared at me across the mahogany conference table. What they didn't know was that I, Jeremy, was Marcus's boss at the company he'd just started working for 3 days ago. The fluorescent lights of my corner office felt harsh against my eyes as I stared out at the Seattle skyline, trying to process what had just happened. At 32 years old, I had worked myself to the bone to reach my position as Vice President of Operations at Meridian Industries. Every promotion, every success, every sacrifice had been earned through dedication and countless 18-hour days. Yet somehow, my family always managed to make me feel like the failure. Marcus was 4 years younger than me, but you'd never guess it from how our parents treated us. While I was putting myself through business school with student loans and part-time jobs, Marcus was backpacking through Europe on mom and dad's dime, finding himself. When I graduated summa cum laude and landed my first corporate position, the family celebration lasted exactly one dinner. When Marcus dropped out of his third college program to start a food truck business that failed within 6 months, our parents threw him a "you tried your best" party that lasted an entire weekend. The pattern had continued for over a decade. Marcus bounced from job to job, relationship to relationship, and scheme to scheme. There was the year he tried to become a cryptocurrency influencer, losing $8,000 of borrowed money. Then came his attempt at becoming a personal trainer, despite never setting foot in a gym regularly. Each failure was met with sympathy, financial support, and encouragement from Robert and Linda, our parents who seemed to believe that effort mattered more than results. Meanwhile, my successes were taken for granted. When I bought my first house, my mother's response was, "Well, you always were good with money." When I received my MBA, my father said, "That's nice, son. Marcus is thinking about going back to school too." It was as if my achievements were expected, unremarkable, while Marcus's mere attempts at achievement were worthy of celebration and support. The cruel irony of the current situation wasn't lost on me. 3 days earlier, Marcus had called me in a panic. His new wife, Stephanie, whom he'd married after a whirlwind 4-month courtship, was pressuring him to get serious about his career. She came from money, old Seattle money, and she had expectations about the lifestyle her husband should provide. "Jeremy, I need your help," he'd said, his voice cracking with desperation. "Stephanie keeps talking about her friends' husbands who work at tech companies and investment firms. She wants me to get a real job, something professional. I've been applying everywhere, but my resume is pretty spotty." Against my better judgment, I had felt sorry for him. Despite years of being overlooked and underappreciated by my family, I couldn't bring myself to watch my little brother struggle. I used my connections and influence to get him hired as a junior analyst in Meridian's marketing department. It wasn't glamorous, but it was a solid entry-level position with good benefits and room for growth. Marcus didn't know that I was the one who had pushed his application through. He thought he'd gotten the job on his own merits, and I had decided to let him believe that. Maybe, I thought, if he felt like he'd earned something himself, it might give him the confidence to actually succeed. Stephanie had been present during our conversation, and I could hear her in the background making comments about "finally" and about time. She'd always looked down on me, despite my success. At family gatherings, she'd make snide remarks about my workaholic lifestyle and my lack of a wife and children. "Jeremy's married to his job," she'd say with a laugh that never reached her eyes. Some people just aren't cut out for real relationships. The wedding had been another ordeal entirely. Despite knowing Marcus for only 4 months, Stephanie had planned an elaborate ceremony that cost nearly $40,000. When my parents ran short on funds halfway through the planning process, guess who got the call? I ended up paying for the flowers, the photographer, and half of the reception venue, all while listening to speeches about how blessed Marcus was to find such a wonderful woman. Now, staring at my phone screen, I read the group text again. The family chat included me, Marcus, Stephanie, and both my parents. Under Marcus's cruel message, I could see that both Mom and Dad had indeed liked it within minutes of it being sent. Not only had they endorsed my public humiliation, but they'd done it enthusiastically. My mother had even added her own comment. Marcus told us you've been spreading rumors about Stephanie at your work. We're disappointed in your jealousy, Jeremy. Maybe it's time you learned to be happy for your brother's success. I felt my chest tighten as I read those words. Spreading rumors? I'd barely mentioned Stephanie to anyone at work, and certainly never in a negative context. The accusation was not only false, but bewildering. What could I have possibly said about a woman I rarely interacted with and who had no connection to my professional life? The injustice of it all hit me like a physical blow. Here I was, the one who had secured Marcus his job, being accused of sabotage by the very people who should have known me better than anyone. I thought about all the times I'd covered for Marcus, all the money I'd lent that was never repaid, all the opportunities I'd created for him that he'd squandered or taken for granted. My assistant Carol knocked gently on my door, reminding me that I had a conference call with the Patterson and Associates team in 20 minutes. Patterson was a potential client worth $15 million annually to our company, and I'd been working on this deal for 8 months. I needed to focus, to push my family drama aside and do what I did best, deliver results. But as I tried to review my notes for the call, my mind kept returning to that group text, the casual cruelty of it, the public nature of the humiliation, and most of all, the immediate support it received from my parents. For the first time in my adult life, I found myself wondering if I'd been fighting for the approval of people who would never truly value what I brought to their lives. The next morning arrived gray and drizzly, typical for Seattle in October. I'd spent most of the night staring at the ceiling, replaying the events of the previous day, and trying to understand how my attempt to help my brother had somehow made me the villain in my family's story. The Patterson conference call had gone well, despite my distracted state, and we were moving forward with a face-to-face meeting that could seal the deal. I arrived at Meridian Industries at 6:30 in the morning, a full hour and a half before most employees started their day. The office building was a gleaming 30-story tower in downtown Seattle, with Meridian occupying floors 25 through 29. My corner office on the 27th floor offered a stunning view of Elliott Bay, and on clear days, you could see Mount Rainier in the distance. Carol was already at her desk when I arrived, which didn't surprise me. At 55, she was the most efficient assistant I'd ever worked with, having been with the company for over 20 years. She knew the business almost as well as the executives, and had an uncanny ability to anticipate problems before they arose. "Good morning, Jeremy," she said, looking up from her computer. "I've confirmed the Patterson meeting for 10 o'clock in Conference Room A. Their team will include Helen Patterson herself, along with their CFO and Director of Strategic Partnerships. I've prepared the presentation materials and had catering set up a continental breakfast. Thank you, Carol. This meeting is crucial for the department, so I want everything perfect." I paused at my office door. "Any other urgent matters this morning?" She consulted her notes. "There are 2 people in the reception area asking to see someone important about a new hire in marketing. They arrived about 10 minutes ago and seem quite insistent about getting a meeting this morning." I frowned, checking my calendar. "I don't have any meetings scheduled about new hires. Did they give names or specify which employee they're asking about?" The gentleman said his name was Marcus Thompson, and he's with an elegantly dressed woman. They claimed it was an urgent matter regarding his employment status and treatment by management. My stomach dropped. Marcus Thompson was my brother's full name, and the description of an elegantly dressed woman could only be Stephanie. What were they doing here? And why were they asking to speak with management about Marcus's employment? He'd only been working here for 3 days. I tried to maintain my composure, but my mind was racing. Did they specify what kind of treatment issue they're concerned about? The woman was quite vocal about it, Carol said carefully. She mentioned something about discrimination and ensuring that Marcus receives appropriate respect and opportunities. She seemed to think that someone in management might have it out for him personally. The irony was staggering. Here I was, the person who had gotten Marcus hired in the first place, and apparently I was now being accused of discriminating against him. I wondered what story Stephanie had concocted in her mind. What narrative she'd built that cast me as the antagonist in her husband's professional life. "Where did you seat them?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Conference room B, as you prefer for unscheduled visitors." I told them someone would be with them shortly. Carol paused, studying my expression. "Is everything all right? You look a bit pale." I forced a smile. "Everything's fine, just surprised by some unscheduled visitors." I glanced at my watch. It was 7:15, which gave me about 2 hours and 45 minutes before the Patterson meeting. "I'll handle this personally. Please make sure we're not disturbed unless it's an absolute emergency." As I walked toward conference room B, I could hear voices through the partially opened door. Stephanie's voice was clear and commanding, while Marcus's responses were muffled and hesitant. I paused outside the door, not to eavesdrop but to prepare myself mentally for what was clearly going to be an uncomfortable confrontation. Through the gap in the door, I could see Stephanie examining the room's furnishings with obvious approval. Conference room B was one of our nicer spaces, with a polished mahogany table, leather chairs, and original artwork on the walls. The floor-to-ceiling windows offered a view of the city that never failed to impress visitors. "This place is definitely high-end," I heard Stephanie say to Marcus. "Make sure whoever you talk to understands that you're management material, not some entry-level grunt. You have a degree and experience. Don't let them treat you like you're lucky to be here." Marcus's response was too quiet for me to hear clearly, but his body language suggested discomfort. He was fidgeting with his tie and looking around nervously, clearly out of his element in the corporate environment. Stephanie continued her commentary, taking photos of the room with her phone. "This is exactly the kind of place I pictured you working. Professional, successful, prestigious. Make sure they understand your potential and your expectations for advancement." I took a deep breath and knocked on the doorframe before entering. "Good morning. I understand you wanted to speak with someone about Marcus Thompson's employment." The look of shock on Stephanie's face when she saw me was almost comical. Her mouth fell open, and for a moment, she was completely speechless. Marcus looked equally stunned, his face cycling through confusion, embarrassment, and something that might have been relief. "Jeremy?" Marcus stammered. "What are you doing here?" "I work here, Marcus," I replied calmly, closing the door behind me. "Actually, I'm the vice president of operations." "And you're here because?" Stephanie recovered from her initial shock quickly, her expression shifting from surprise to calculation to indignation in rapid succession. "Well, this is convenient," she said, her tone becoming sharp and aggressive. "You can handle this situation yourself then. Marcus deserves better than some entry-level position. He has a bachelor's degree and years of experience. We want him moved to management immediately." I sat down across from them, maintaining my professional demeanor despite the surreal nature of the situation. Marcus is fortunate to have the position he does, given his employment history. The junior analyst role is actually quite competitive, and there's significant room for growth. "Fortunate?" Stephanie's voice rose. "He shouldn't feel fortunate to work for his own brother. He should expect preferential treatment, not discrimination." The accusation hung in the air like a toxic cloud. "I'm sorry, but what discrimination are you referring to? Marcus has been employed here for exactly 3 days. Stephanie leaned forward, her eyes blazing with self-righteous anger. The discrimination of placing him in a junior position when he could clearly handle management responsibilities. The discrimination of making him feel like just another employee instead of family. The discrimination of ignoring his potential while probably promoting less qualified people who don't have personal connections. I looked at Marcus, who was staring at the table and refusing to meet my eyes. "Is this how you feel, Marcus? That you're being discriminated against?" Before he could answer, Stephanie cut him off. "Of course he feels that way. He's just too polite to say it directly. But I'm not. I want to speak to your supervisor about this situation. I want Marcus moved to a position more appropriate to his qualifications and family connections." "And what position would that be?" I asked. "Assistant manager. At minimum, something with a title that reflects his education and his relationship to company leadership." She paused, studying my expression. "You do have the authority to make these changes, don't you? Or do we need to go over your head?" I felt a familiar tightness in my chest, the same feeling I got during family gatherings when I was expected to accommodate unreasonable demands simply because we shared DNA. Stephanie, the business world doesn't work that way. Promotions are based on performance, experience, and demonstrated capability. Marcus has been here for 3 days. He hasn't even completed his orientation training yet. That's exactly the kind of thinking that holds people back, she snapped. Marcus doesn't need to prove himself like some stranger off the street. He's family. He should be fast-tracked based on his connections and potential. The conversation was interrupted by my phone buzzing with an urgent message from Carol. The Patterson and Associates team had arrived an hour early and was requesting an immediate meeting. They were in the lobby and wanted to move forward with the presentation as soon as possible. I stared at the message, feeling the weight of the moment. The Patterson deal represented months of work and millions of dollars in potential revenue for my department. Missing this opportunity or handling it poorly could set back my career significantly. But here I was, trapped in a conference room with family members who seemed determined to create a crisis where none existed. I need to handle an urgent business matter, I said, standing up. We can continue this conversation afterward. Stephanie's expression turned predatory. Oh no, Jeremy. You're not going to brush us off like we're some unimportant interruption. Marcus's career is more important than whatever meeting you think you need to attend. Family comes first, or haven't your parents taught you that? The irony of her words, coming less than 24 hours after my family had publicly humiliated me, was almost unbearable. But I maintained my composure, knowing that losing my temper would only make the situation worse. Stephanie, you're in my workplace now. This is a business environment with professional obligations and responsibilities. I will address your concerns, but not at the expense of my professional duties. She smiled coldly. We'll see about that. Maybe it's time your colleagues learned what kind of person you really are. How you treat your own family when they need your help. The threat was clear, and I realized with growing dread that Stephanie was prepared to sabotage my professional life to get what she wanted. As I looked at Marcus, still avoiding eye contact and clearly uncomfortable with his wife's aggressive tactics, I wondered how a situation that started with me trying to help my brother had spiraled so completely out of control. The walk back to my office felt like a funeral march. I had 15 minutes to prepare for the most important meeting of my professional life, and instead of focusing on closing a $15 million deal, I was dealing with family drama that threatened to explode in the middle of my workplace. Carol was waiting with an urgent expression. The Patterson team is in the executive lounge. Helen Patterson specifically requested to move the meeting up because they have a flight to catch this afternoon. She seemed very pleased about the early start, saying it shows our commitment to efficiency. I nodded, trying to compartmentalize my emotions. Set up the main conference room, full presentation setup with the smartboard and video conferencing capability. I'll be there in 10 minutes. What about the people in conference room B? I paused, weighing my options. Every instinct told me to deal with Marcus and Stephanie first, to prevent them from causing a scene during my business meeting. But I also knew that giving in to their demands would only encourage more unreasonable behavior in the future. They'll have to wait, I said finally. This meeting takes priority. I spent the next few minutes reviewing my presentation notes and trying to center myself mentally. The Patterson deal was the culmination of months of relationship building, market analysis, and strategic planning. Helen Patterson was known for making quick decisions based on first impressions, and I couldn't afford to let my personal problems affect my professional performance. The main conference room was on the 28th floor, accessed by a private elevator that required executive clearance. As I rode up, I tried to push thoughts of Marcus and Stephanie from my mind. Whatever happened next, I needed to be fully present for this meeting. Helen Patterson was a formidable woman in her 60s, with silver hair and sharp eyes that seemed to miss nothing. She'd built her company from a small family business into a multi-billion-dollar enterprise, and she was known for her no-nonsense approach to partnerships. With her were David Chen, their CFO, and Sarah Williams, their Director of Strategic Partnerships. Jeremy, thank you for accommodating our schedule change, Helen said, extending her hand with a firm grip. We're excited to see what Meridian can offer our organization. The presentation went smoothly initially. I walked them through our service offerings, case studies of successful partnerships, and detailed projections for their account. Helen asked pointed questions about our scalability, quality control measures, and long-term strategic vision. I felt confident in my responses, drawing on years of experience and intimate knowledge of our capabilities. Midway through the presentation, my phone buzzed with a text message from Stephanie. "We're not waiting much longer. Marcus deserves respect, and if you can't provide it, we'll find someone who will." I ignored the message and continued with the presentation, but the interruption had broken my concentration slightly. Helen noticed the momentary distraction but didn't comment. A few minutes later, another message arrived. "I'm going to tell these executives exactly what kind of person you really are." This time, I couldn't hide my concern. The threat was explicit and immediate. Stephanie was clearly prepared to disrupt my business meeting if she didn't get what she wanted. I excused myself briefly, explaining that I needed to handle a minor urgent matter. Back in conference room B, I found the situation had deteriorated. Stephanie was pacing angrily, while Marcus sat slumped in his chair, looking increasingly distressed. The contrast between his obvious discomfort and her aggressive energy was stark. Finally, Stephanie snapped when I entered. "We've been waiting for over an hour. This is completely unacceptable treatment. I apologize for the delay, but I'm in the middle of closing a significant business deal. I'll need to address your concerns after this meeting concludes." "No," she said firmly. "We're addressing this now. I don't care about your business deal. Marcus's career and dignity are more important than whatever money you're trying to make." I tried to remain calm, but the stress of juggling two critical situations was beginning to show. "Stephanie, I understand your concerns, but you're asking me to prioritize personal matters over professional obligations. That's not how business works." "That's exactly the problem," she replied. "You've forgotten that family should come first. You've become so obsessed with your corporate success that you've lost sight of what really matters." Marcus finally spoke up, his voice barely above a whisper. "Maybe we should just wait, Steph. Jeremy seems really busy." "No, Marcus," she said sharply. "You need to stop being so passive. Demand what you deserve. Your brother has the power to fix this situation right now, and he's choosing not to. What does that tell you about his priorities?" The manipulation was obvious and painful to witness. Stephanie was deliberately putting Marcus in an impossible position, forcing him to choose between supporting his wife's unreasonable demands and acknowledging that I was actually trying to help him. "Look," I said, trying one more time to reason with them. "Marcus, you have a good job with growth potential. You're learning the business and building experience. Rushing into management without understanding the fundamentals would actually hurt your long-term career prospects." Stephanie laughed bitterly. "That's exactly the kind of excuse people use when they want to keep others down. Marcus doesn't need to start at the bottom like some nobody. He has advantages, and he should use them." "What advantages?" I asked. "His employment history? His experience in our industry?" "His family connections," she said, as if it should be obvious. "His relationship to you. That should count for something." The entitlement in her voice was staggering. She genuinely believed that being related to me should automatically translate to special treatment, regardless of qualifications or performance. It was exactly the kind of nepotism that I'd always tried to avoid in my professional life. My phone rang with an emergency call from Carol. "Jeremy, I'm sorry to interrupt, but the Patterson team is asking when you'll be returning. Helen Patterson mentioned that they have a tight schedule and need to wrap up soon." I felt a moment of panic. Losing this deal because of family drama would be a professional disaster. But as I looked at Stephanie's determined expression, I realized she was fully prepared to escalate the situation if I didn't give her what she wanted immediately. "Give me 5 more minutes," I told Carol, then turned back to my brother and his wife. "I need to finish this business meeting. It's worth $15 million to my company and affects the jobs of everyone in my department. We can discuss Marcus's career path afterward." Stephanie's eyes lit up with a predatory gleam. $15 million? Well, that's interesting. Maybe these business partners would like to know what kind of person they're dealing with. someone who discriminates against his own family. The threat was explicit now. She was prepared to sabotage my career to get what she wanted. I looked at Marcus, hoping he would finally stand up to his wife's destructive behavior, but he was staring at his hands, clearly torn between conflicting loyalties. "You wouldn't do that," I said, though I wasn't entirely convinced. "Try me," Stephanie replied. "I'm going to march into that conference room and tell them exactly how you treat people who depend on you. Let's see how they feel about doing business with someone who abuses his power to settle personal grudges." As she moved toward the door, I realized that everything I'd worked for was about to be destroyed by someone who saw my success as nothing more than a tool for her own advancement. The cruel irony was that I'd created this situation by trying to help Marcus in the first place. Now my good intentions were being weaponized against me by someone who felt entitled to the fruits of my labor without any of the effort. The moment of decision arrived with crystalline clarity. I could either capitulate to Stephanie's demands and compromise my professional integrity, or I could trust that my colleagues and clients would see through her manipulation. The choice would define not just this situation, but how I allowed my family to treat me going forward. "Stephanie," I said quietly, "if you disrupt my business meeting, you'll be escorted from the building by security. This is my workplace, and here, professional behavior is required." Her eyes widened with surprise. She clearly hadn't expected me to call her bluff. "You wouldn't dare. I'm family. Being family doesn't give you the right to sabotage my career," I replied. "If you can't behave professionally in a professional environment, you'll be removed from it." I left them in conference room B and returned to the Patterson meeting, my heart pounding but my resolve firm. I'd spent too many years accommodating my family's unreasonable demands, and I wouldn't let them destroy my professional life as well. Helen Patterson noticed my slightly flustered state when I returned. "Everything all right, Jeremy?" "Just a minor administrative issue," I said, forcing myself to focus. "Nothing that can't be handled later." I dove back into the presentation with renewed energy, walking them through our implementation timeline and support structure. Helen was particularly interested in our quality assurance protocols and asked detailed questions about our monitoring systems. I found myself relaxing into the familiar rhythm of professional discussion, grateful for the temporary escape from family drama. During a brief break while David Chen reviewed our financial projections, my phone buzzed with increasingly frantic messages from Stephanie. "This isn't over. You'll regret treating us this way. I'm coming to find you right now." I showed the messages to Carol and asked her to contact building security as a precaution. The last thing I needed was Stephanie bursting into the executive conference room during crucial negotiations. The Patterson team was impressed with our proposal. Helen leaned back in her chair, studying the numbers one final time. "Your projections are aggressive but realistic. Your quality metrics are strong. I have to say, Jeremy, your presentation today has been very professional. Thank you. We're excited about the possibility of partnering with Patterson and Associates." Sarah Williams nodded approvingly. "Your crisis management skills are particularly noteworthy. I noticed you handled an interruption earlier with remarkable composure. That kind of grace under pressure is exactly what we need in a partner." I was about to respond when the conference room door burst open. Stephanie stood in the doorway, her face flushed with anger and determination. Behind her, I could see Carol trying to catch up, looking mortified at the breach of protocol. "Excuse me," Stephanie announced loudly, "but I need these people to know exactly who they're considering doing business with." The silence in the room was deafening. Helen Patterson's expression shifted from mild curiosity to obvious disapproval as Stephanie marched uninvited into our private meeting. David Chen and Sarah Williams exchanged concerned glances, clearly wondering what kind of organization they were dealing with. "Ma'am," Helen said coldly, "this is a private business meeting. You need to leave immediately." "Not until I've said what I came to say," Stephanie replied, pointing an accusing finger at me. "This man uses his position to discriminate against his own family. He's keeping his brother in a low-level job out of pure spite and jealousy. You need to know that you're dealing with someone who abuses his power for personal reasons." I remained seated, forcing myself to stay calm despite the humiliation of having my private family drama exposed to my most important clients. "I apologize for this interruption." Building security is on the way to escort this individual out. But Stephanie wasn't finished. Marcus came to him for help, and instead of supporting his brother, he gave him the worst possible position just to keep him down. He's vindictive and petty, and you shouldn't trust him with your business. Helen Patterson stood slowly, her face a mask of professional disapproval. Young woman, you've made some very serious accusations. Do you have any evidence to support these claims? I don't need evidence, Stephanie shot back. I know what's happening. Marcus deserves better treatment, and Jeremy refuses to give it to him out of jealousy. David Chen leaned forward. Are you saying that Mr. Jeremy here got his brother a job but deliberately gave him an inferior position? Exactly, Stephanie said triumphantly, apparently not realizing how her words sounded to objective observers. Sarah Williams frowned. So he used his influence to help a family member get employed. But you're upset about the specific level of the position? For the first time, Stephanie seemed to realize that her argument wasn't landing as she'd expected. He could have done more. He should have done more. Marcus has a degree and experience. I took a deep breath and addressed the Patterson team directly. I apologize for this disruption. The facts are these. My brother Marcus asked me for help finding employment. I used my connections to get him hired as a junior analyst, despite his limited experience in our industry. He's been with the company for 3 days and is still in orientation. Helen Patterson looked from me to Stephanie and back again. Let me understand this correctly. You helped your brother get a job, and now his wife is angry that it wasn't a higher-level position? That's an oversimplification, Stephanie protested, but her confidence was clearly shaking. Is it? Sarah Williams asked. Because it sounds like Mr. Jeremy went out of his way to help a family member, and you're criticizing him for not doing enough. Marcus finally appeared in the doorway, looking mortified. Stephanie, please stop. This is embarrassing. Don't you dare take his side, she snapped at her husband. You deserve respect, and I'm going to make sure you get it. Helen Patterson had clearly seen enough. Security, please escort this woman from the building. And young man, she addressed Marcus, I suggest you collect your wife and remove yourselves from these premises immediately. 2 security guards appeared, and Stephanie realized that her dramatic gambit had backfired completely. Instead of exposing me as a villain, she'd revealed herself as an entitled troublemaker who felt comfortable disrupting business meetings to make unreasonable demands. This isn't over, she said as the security guards prepared to escort her out. I'll file complaints with corporate. I'll expose how this company treats family members of employees. Ma'am, one of the security guards said firmly, you need to leave now, or you'll be arrested for trespassing. As Stephanie was led away, still protesting loudly, Marcus lingered in the doorway. I'm sorry, he said quietly. I didn't want this to happen. Helen Patterson studied him for a moment. Young man, a word of advice. Your wife's behavior reflects on you professionally. If you want to succeed in business, you need to understand appropriate boundaries and professional conduct. Marcus nodded miserably and followed the security guards out. The conference room fell silent, except for the sound of the air conditioning and the distant hum of Seattle traffic 27 floors below. Helen Patterson returned to her seat and looked at me with what might have been respect. Well, that was certainly educational. Again, I apologize for the disruption. This kind of thing has never happened before and will not happen again. Actually, David Chen said thoughtfully, I'm impressed by how you handled that situation. You remained professional under extremely difficult circumstances. That speaks well of your character and your ability to manage crisis situations. Sarah Williams nodded in agreement. The fact that you helped your brother get a job, despite what appears to be significant personal drama, actually reflects positively on your integrity. Many people would have refused to get involved. Helen Patterson smiled for the first time that morning. Jeremy, I think we've seen enough. Your company's proposal is solid, your presentation was professional, and your crisis management skills are clearly excellent. We'd like to move forward with the partnership. As they shook hands and discussed next steps, I felt a mixture of relief, vindication, and sadness. Relief that the deal was secured, despite Stephanie's sabotage attempt. Vindication that my professional colleagues could see through her manipulation and recognize the real situation, but also sadness that my attempt to help my brother had created such a destructive conflict. The irony wasn't lost on me that Stephanie's attempt to destroy my career had actually demonstrated exactly the kinds of qualities that made me valuable to clients like Patterson and Associates. Her behavior had backfired so completely that it almost seemed like poetic justice. But as I watched the Patterson team gather their materials and prepare to leave, I knew that the real consequences of this morning were just beginning to unfold. The Patterson team departed with handshakes, signed preliminary agreements, and promises to finalize the contract within the week. Helen Patterson's parting words still echoed in my mind. "Jeremy, in 30 years of business, I've learned that you can judge someone's character by how they handle unexpected challenges. You passed that test today with flying colors, but even as I celebrated this professional victory, I knew the personal fallout was far from over. Carol informed me that building security had detained Stephanie for attempting to access restricted areas of the building. Apparently, after being escorted from the executive floor, she had tried to use the visitor elevator to return and finish the conversation. She was asking the security desk for your home address and personal contact information," Carol reported. When they refused, she became increasingly agitated and demanded to speak with the company president. She claimed you were violating federal discrimination laws. I rubbed my temples, feeling a tension headache building. "Where is she now?" "Security has her in the main lobby. She's refusing to leave the building until she speaks with someone in corporate management. Marcus is with her, trying to get her to come home." Through my office window, I could see down to the lobby level of the building. Even from 27 floors up, I could make out a small crowd gathered near the security desk. The situation was clearly escalating beyond a simple family disagreement. "I need to handle this before it gets worse," I said, though the prospect of another confrontation with Stephanie was exhausting. As I rode the elevator down to the lobby, I tried to prepare myself mentally for whatever scene awaited me. The elevator doors opened to reveal exactly what I'd feared. Stephanie standing at the security desk, speaking loudly enough for everyone in the lobby to hear, while Marcus stood beside her looking like he wanted to disappear into the marble floor. "This company discriminates against family members of employees," she was saying to the head of security. "They're violating federal employment laws by refusing to promote qualified candidates based on personal bias." A small crowd of employees and visitors had gathered to watch the spectacle. I recognized several colleagues among them, including Tom Bradley from the legal department and Susan Martinez from Human Resources. Their expressions ranged from concern to embarrassment on my behalf. "Stephanie," I said as I approached, "you need to leave the building. You're creating a disturbance and making false accusations." She spun around to face me, her eyes blazing with righteous indignation. "False accusations? You're discriminating against your own brother, and everyone needs to know about it." "I got Marcus a job," I said quietly, hoping to de-escalate the situation. "I used my influence to help him when he asked for it." "A job beneath his qualifications," she shot back. "You deliberately gave him a low-level position to humiliate him and show him who's in charge." Marcus finally found his voice. "Stephanie, please. This is getting out of hand. People are staring." "Good," she replied. "They should stare. They should know what kind of person Jeremy really is underneath all that corporate polish." Tom Bradley stepped forward, introducing himself as the company's legal counsel. "Ma'am, I need to inform you that making false accusations about employment discrimination is a serious matter. You're also trespassing on private property after being asked to leave." Stephanie laughed bitterly. "False accusations? Ask Jeremy why he didn't put Marcus in management from day one. Ask him why he's keeping his brother in a junior position when he has the power to promote him immediately. Because that's not how employment works," Susan Martinez interjected. "Positions are filled based on qualifications, experience, and demonstrated ability. Family relationships don't supersede standard hiring practices." "They should," Stephanie said firmly. "Family loyalty should count for something. If you have the power to help your family succeed, and you choose not to use it, what kind of person does that make you?" The question hung in the air, and I realized that this was the core of our conflict. Stephanie genuinely believed that my professional success should automatically translate to special treatment for Marcus, regardless of his qualifications or my ethical obligations as a manager. It makes me someone who believes in fairness and meritocracy, I said. Someone who won't compromise professional standards for personal relationships. It makes you someone who's forgotten where you came from, she replied. Someone who's become so obsessed with corporate rules that you've lost your humanity. The accusation stung, particularly because it echoed some of my family's long-standing criticisms. But before I could respond, my phone rang with a call that would change everything. Jeremy, this is Patricia Williams, CEO of Meridian Industries. I need to see you in my office immediately, and bring whoever is causing the disturbance in our lobby. Patricia Williams was a formidable woman who had built Meridian into one of the most successful companies in the Pacific Northwest. She was known for her direct approach to problem-solving and her zero tolerance for anything that reflected poorly on the company's reputation. As we rode the elevator to the executive floor, the tension was palpable. Stephanie had finally realized that her public scene might have consequences beyond embarrassing me. Marcus looked like he might be sick. I tried to prepare myself for what could be a career-ending conversation. Patricia's office was a study in understated elegance, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of Elliott Bay. She was waiting for us with Helen Patterson, who apparently hadn't left the building yet. Miss Patterson was kind enough to wait so she could witness our resolution of this situation, Patricia said. She's expressed some concerns about the disturbance in our lobby. Helen Patterson looked directly at Stephanie. Young woman, I want you to understand something. I've been in business for 40 years, and I've seen every kind of family drama you can imagine. What I witnessed today was a textbook example of entitlement and unprofessional behavior. But Jeremy is discriminating against Marcus, Stephanie protested weakly. No, Helen replied firmly. Jeremy helped his brother get a job. The fact that you consider that help inadequate because it wasn't a management position reveals a fundamental misunderstanding of how professional advancement works. Patricia Williams leaned forward in her chair. Miss Thompson, I've reviewed your husband's employment file. He was hired 3 days ago as a junior analyst, which is actually above the entry-level position his qualifications would normally warrant. Jeremy used his influence to get Marcus a better opportunity than he would have received through standard channels. The revelation hit Stephanie like a physical blow. What do you mean above his qualifications? I mean that your husband's employment history consists primarily of short-term positions in unrelated industries. His resume shows a pattern of job hopping and incomplete projects. Under normal circumstances, we wouldn't have considered him for any position. Marcus's face went white. He clearly hadn't realized that his employment was entirely due to my intervention. The junior analyst position he'd thought he'd earned on his own merits was actually a favor that stretched the bounds of normal hiring practices. Furthermore, Patricia continued, your behavior today has created a security risk and potential liability for our company. You've made false accusations about employment discrimination, disrupted business operations, and refused to leave when asked. These actions could result in criminal charges for trespassing and defamation. Stephanie's bravado finally crumbled. I was just trying to help my husband's career. By sabotaging his brother's? Helen Patterson asked. By publicly humiliating the person who went out of his way to help him? That's not helpful behavior. It's destructive behavior. The weight of the situation finally seemed to hit Marcus. Jeremy, I didn't know you were the one who got me the job. I thought I got it on my own. I wanted you to feel like you'd earned it yourself, I said. I thought it might give you confidence to succeed. Instead, it gave his wife ammunition to attack you, Patricia observed. Which brings me to my final point. Marcus, your employment with this company is contingent on your ability to maintain appropriate professional boundaries. If your personal relationships interfere with business operations again, your position will be terminated immediately. The meeting concluded with Stephanie being formally banned from company property and Marcus being placed on probationary status. As we prepared to leave Patricia's office, Helen Patterson pulled me aside. Jeremy, what happened today actually reinforced my confidence in our partnership. You maintained your integrity under extremely difficult circumstances, and you handled a crisis with remarkable professionalism. Those are exactly the qualities we look for in our business partners. As the elevator doors closed on Marcus and Stephanie, I realized that the morning's events had fundamentally changed not just my family dynamics, but my understanding of what it meant to help the people I cared about. Sometimes, the greatest kindness is refusing to enable destructive behavior, even when that behavior comes from the people closest to you. The following weeks unfolded like a slow-motion avalanche, with consequences I never could have anticipated when I first received that cruel group text about the barbecue. What had started as a family argument about party invitations had exposed fundamental problems that ran much deeper than I'd realized. Marcus returned to work the next day, subdued and clearly embarrassed by the previous day's events. He requested a transfer to a different department to avoid any appearance of favoritism, which I supported through HR. The transfer actually worked out well for him, as the customer service department was better suited to his interpersonal skills and gave him a chance to rebuild his professional reputation. But the real fallout was happening at home. Over the next 2 weeks, I received increasingly frantic calls from Marcus about his deteriorating marriage. Stephanie, it turned out, had been living in a fantasy world where my professional success was something she could leverage for her own social advancement. She married me because she thought I had family connections that could help her, Marcus admitted during a painful conversation in my office. She's been telling her friends that she's married to someone with corporate family ties. The whole relationship was built on false expectations. The revelation was heartbreaking, but not entirely surprising. I'd seen how Stephanie's eyes lit up whenever money or status was discussed, how she name-dropped expensive brands and exclusive venues in casual conversation. What I hadn't realized was that she saw Marcus's relationship to me as a business asset rather than a family bond. She's been running some kind of social media account where she gives advice to other women about how to leverage their boyfriends' and husbands' family connections for career advancement, Marcus continued. She's been charging people for consultation calls about how to manipulate family relationships for financial gain. The scope of Stephanie's deception was staggering. She'd essentially built a business around coaching other women to exploit their partner's relatives, using her marriage to Marcus as proof of her expertise. My professional success had become a prop in her elaborate scheme to monetize family manipulation. But the most shocking discovery came when building security contacted me about a concerning incident. While reviewing surveillance footage from the day of Stephanie's disruption, they'd noticed her taking detailed photographs of company documents, employee directories, and executive nameplates. She'd been gathering intelligence about Meridian's corporate structure and personnel. "We've forwarded this information to the police," the security director informed me. Taking unauthorized photographs of corporate information could constitute industrial espionage, especially if she was planning to sell that information to competitors or use it for fraudulent purposes. The police investigation revealed that Stephanie's social media scheme was more sophisticated and potentially criminal than any of us had realized. She'd been coaching women to pose as potential business partners or investment opportunities to gain access to their targets' professional networks and financial information. Several of her clients had used her advice to gain unauthorized access to corporate information through their boyfriends and husbands. In at least 3 cases, this had resulted in identity theft and financial fraud. Stephanie was now facing serious criminal charges for conspiracy to commit fraud and wire fraud. Marcus was devastated by the revelations. "I thought she loved me," he said during one of our conversations. "I thought she was just ambitious and wanted us to succeed together. I never imagined she was using me to run criminal schemes." The divorce proceedings were swift and brutal. Stephanie's criminal charges made it impossible for her to claim any marital assets, and Marcus discovered that most of their shared debts were related to her fraudulent activities. She'd been using credit cards in his name to fund her lifestyle and her illegal business operations. But perhaps the most significant development came from an unexpected source: our parents. The full story of what had happened eventually reached them through Marcus, who felt compelled to explain why his marriage was ending so abruptly. My mother called me 3 weeks after the office incident, and for the first time in years, I heard genuine remorse in her voice. "Jeremy, I owe you an apology," she said. "We had no idea what was really happening. Marcus told us everything about the job, about Stephanie's schemes, about how you tried to help him, and how we responded to that group text. The conversation was long overdue and emotionally exhausting. My parents admitted that they'd been unfairly favoring Marcus for years, making excuses for his failures while taking my successes for granted. They'd somehow convinced themselves that I didn't need their support or approval because I was already successful. "We thought you were self-sufficient and didn't need our encouragement," my father explained during a separate conversation. "We were so focused on trying to help Marcus find his way that we forgot to appreciate what you'd already accomplished." The family therapy sessions that followed were painful but necessary. With a professional mediator, we were able to discuss decades of accumulated resentment, misunderstanding, and unfair treatment. Marcus acknowledged that he'd been enabling Stephanie's behavior because he was afraid of losing her, even when he knew her demands were unreasonable. My parents confronted their own biases and recognized how their well-intentioned favoritism had actually harmed both of their sons. Marcus had never learned to be self-reliant because he'd always had someone to bail him out, while I'd learned to expect nothing from my family emotionally. The healing process was gradual and sometimes setback-prone, but it was real. Marcus threw himself into his work with new determination, eager to prove that he could succeed on his own merits. He started attending counseling to address his pattern of seeking approval from destructive partners. My parents made genuine efforts to acknowledge my achievements and express pride in my accomplishments. More importantly, they began treating both Marcus and me as adults capable of making our own decisions and facing our own consequences. But the most satisfying resolution came from an unexpected source. 6 weeks after the incident, Helen Patterson called me personally to report that 3 other companies had contacted her asking about Meridian Industries based on her recommendation. "Word travels fast in our industry," she said. "The story of how you handled that family crisis has become something of a legend among executive circles. People are impressed by your professionalism under pressure and your integrity in difficult circumstances." The Patterson deal had not only succeeded, but had opened doors to additional opportunities worth potentially $50 million in annual revenue. My professional reputation had been enhanced, rather than damaged, by the events that Stephanie had intended to destroy my career. As I sat in my office 6 weeks later, looking out at the Seattle skyline and reflecting on everything that had happened, I realized that the group text about the barbecue had been a blessing in disguise. It had forced long overdue conversations, exposed destructive patterns, and ultimately strengthened both my professional position and my family relationships. The irony was that by standing up for myself professionally, I'd earned more respect from both my colleagues and my family than years of accommodation and self-sacrifice had ever achieved. Sometimes, the people who love us most need to see us defend our own worth before they can truly appreciate what we bring to their lives. 3 months later, I stood in the same office where this story began, but everything had changed. The Seattle skyline looked the same. The mahogany desk still gleamed under the fluorescent lights, and Elliott Bay still sparkled in the distance. But the man looking out at that view was fundamentally different from the one who had received that humiliating group text on a Tuesday morning in October. The Patterson deal had not only closed successfully, but had exceeded all projections. Their account brought in $18 million in the first year alone, surpassing even our most optimistic estimates. Helen Patterson had become not just a client, but a mentor, introducing me to other executives and serving as a reference for my leadership abilities. The ripple effects of that success were profound. Based on my performance during the crisis and the subsequent business growth, I was promoted to Senior Vice President with a 30% salary increase and equity options that would secure my financial future. More importantly, I'd earned a reputation throughout the company as someone who could handle pressure with grace and integrity. But the professional victories, satisfying as they were, paled in comparison to the personal transformation that had taken place. The family therapy sessions had continued for 3 months, and while they weren't always comfortable, they'd created space for honest conversations that should have happened years earlier. Marcus was thriving in his new department. Without the pressure of Stephanie's unrealistic expectations, he'd discovered that he actually enjoyed customer service work and was good at it. He'd been promoted twice in 3 months, based purely on his performance, and had started dating someone new, a kindergarten teacher named Amy, who appreciated him for who he was rather than what he could provide. For the first time in my adult life, I feel like I'm succeeding because of my own efforts, he told me during one of our now regular lunch meetings. Stephanie always made me feel like I wasn't enough, unless I was getting special treatment or taking shortcuts. Amy makes me want to be better, not just appear better. My parents had undergone their own transformation. My mother started sending me articles about business trends and asking thoughtful questions about my work. My father began calling just to check in, without any agenda or requests for favors. They'd learned to express pride in my accomplishments without immediately pivoting to concerns about Marcus. The barbecue that had started this entire saga finally happened, rescheduled for December as a family Christmas celebration. But this time, the invitation came with a heartfelt apology and a genuine request for my presence. When I arrived, I found a completely different family dynamic. Marcus and Amy were helping in the kitchen, laughing together as they prepared side dishes. My parents greeted me with warmth that felt authentic rather than obligatory. There was no tension, no underlying resentment, no sense that I was an inconvenience to be tolerated. During dinner, my father raised his glass in a toast to Jeremy, who taught us all what it means to have integrity under pressure. We're proud of the man you've become, and sorry it took us so long to tell you that. The words I'd waited years to hear finally came, and they meant everything because they'd been earned through genuine growth rather than demanded through confrontation. Stephanie's legal troubles had resolved with a plea agreement that included restitution to her victims and 2 years of probation. She'd moved back to her parents' home in another state, and we'd heard through Marcus that she was working as a retail clerk while paying off her debts. The social media empire built on manipulating family relationships had crumbled completely. But even Stephanie's story carried a lesson. During the divorce proceedings, it came out that she'd been raised by parents who'd taught her that relationships were transactional and that love was something you earned through achievement rather than something you received unconditionally. Her behavior, while inexcusable, was the product of a worldview that reduced human connections to economic opportunities. As I reflected on the past 6 months, I realized that the group text had been a catalyst for changes that needed to happen, but that I'd been too comfortable to pursue. I'd spent years accommodating my family's dysfunction because it was easier than confronting it. I'd accepted being undervalued because challenging that dynamic seemed more difficult than enduring it. The professional crisis had forced me to choose between my integrity and my family's approval, and by choosing integrity, I'd ultimately earned something much more valuable than approval: genuine respect. My colleagues respected me for maintaining my principles under pressure. My family respected me for standing up for myself when it mattered most. The experience taught me that helping people doesn't always mean giving them what they want. Sometimes, the greatest kindness is refusing to enable destructive behavior, even when that refusal causes temporary pain or conflict. By not giving Marcus special treatment, I'd forced him to develop genuine competence. By not accommodating Stephanie's demands, I'd protected both my professional reputation and my family's long-term well-being. I learned that success shared with people who truly value your efforts is infinitely more satisfying than achievements celebrated by those who take them for granted. The Patterson executives appreciated my work in a way my family never had, and that professional recognition gave me the confidence to demand better treatment in my personal relationships. Most importantly, I discovered that standing up for yourself doesn't make you selfish or mean-spirited. It makes you someone worthy of respect. People who genuinely care about you will rise to meet higher standards when you stop accepting less than you deserve. The irony of the entire situation wasn't lost on me. By refusing to compromise my professional ethics for family pressure, I'd actually strengthened both my career and my family relationships. By choosing my integrity over my family's immediate approval, I'd created the foundation for more authentic and respectful connections with the people I loved. The barbecue that had been used to humiliate me became a symbol of redemption and growth. The group text that was meant to exclude me from family celebrations became the catalyst for inclusion based on mutual respect rather than obligation. As I write this, I think about anyone who might be in a similar situation, feeling torn between family loyalty and personal integrity, between helping others and protecting yourself. The lesson I want to share is this: you can love people deeply while still maintaining boundaries. You can be supportive without being a doormat. You can help family members without sacrificing your own dignity or professional reputation. Sometimes, the people who love us most need to see us defend our own worth, before they can truly appreciate what we bring to their lives. Sometimes, saying no to unreasonable demands is the most loving thing you can do because it forces everyone involved to build relationships based on respect rather than exploitation. The group text that changed my life taught me that family isn't about unconditional accommodation. It's about unconditional love, expressed through healthy boundaries and mutual respect. Success isn't just about professional achievement. It's about building a life where your efforts are valued and your integrity is maintained. Have you ever found yourself in a situation where family expectations conflicted with your professional or personal values? How did you handle the pressure to compromise your principles for the sake of keeping peace? I'd love to hear your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please consider liking this video to help others find it who might be dealing with similar challenges. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories about navigating the complex relationships between family, work, and personal integrity. And please share this with anyone who might benefit from hearing about the importance of maintaining healthy boundaries while still loving deeply. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope it reminds you that standing up for yourself isn't selfish. It's necessary for building the kind of relationships in life that truly serve everyone involved. Remember, the people who are meant to be in your life will respect your boundaries and value your contributions. Anyone who doesn't isn't someone you need to please at the expense of your own well-being. Until next time, take care of yourselves and remember that your integrity is never negotiable, no matter who's asking you to compromise it.